Hi, this is Reverend Dr. Nadine Rosechild Sullivan, and I would like to invite you to my video for this week for Sunday, May 23rd, 2021. I'm actually recording on Saturday, though, just because of the way my schedule looks for this weekend. So welcome to the weekend of May 22nd and May 23rd, 2021. And I rejoice with you that you have made it to this day. In this space, I just want to take a moment and note where we're at. I want to note a cause of rejoicing this week. This week, both the House and the Senate passed into law and President Biden signed into law the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. So he signed it on May 20th, 2021, so 2 days ago. And I just want to talk for a minute about, some of the history of race and racism in the United States. I can't go deeply here. I am a professor of sociology. I teach classes I have graduate concentrations in gender and sexuality and race and ethnicity. I've across a decade and a half taught classes on race and on immigration. And in this space, I'm also currently the coordinator of a graduate program in diversity and inclusion. And so, speaking to you from this space, I want to say that there's a lot of noise abroad in the land tonight and in the past months about something called critical race theory. Critical race theory is actually an academic discipline. It's set at the college level, right? It's for academic, it is not taught K through 12. It is set at the college level, and it is scholars, race scholars, who are also legal scholars. And it is a intersection of those two disciplines of law and of race studies that looks at how law has been used to systematize and institutionalize racism, how racism has been used in law. So it's about that intersection, race and law. I'm not a legal scholar, but I am, I have done my best to be something of a race scholar across my years of study and my years of teaching. And in that space, while I've not written on that topic, I've confined my writing to gender and sexuality, but with the consciousness of the intersectionality of race but centering on gender and sexuality. But in that space, looking at the literature on race. So I did a graduate concentration. I had to read 117 books one particular summer. Half of them were in race and half of them were in gender, but half of them were in race. And then I had to be able to pass my qualifying exams in that topic. And so I've read broadly, and that my dissertation is not that long ago. I've read broadly in the race literature, and I keep abreast and up to date of things going on in the research in the field. And, the fact is that there are facts in history. And it's really hard to teach sociology without teaching some history. So while I'm not a trained historian, I am a trained sociologist in the literature of race. And so there's a lot of history there, right? There's a lot of knowledge of who, what, where, when, and why. How did this happen, right? And so when we look at the history of racism in the United States, it is clear and indisputable that this nation has some wonderful things and some horrible things in our history. So in our founding, we have the wonderful documents I've talked about in these broadcasts before, wonderful documents about how we're all created equal and how we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words have been used by every people group to say, me too. No, wait, you passed this, you made this Declaration of Independence, and then you had this war, and then you made this Constitution, and you made it all about white propertied males. Well, I'm a white man without property. I want to vote as well. So a fight to press in, right? And then women came along, I'm a human being too. And so the Declaration of Sentiments in 1848, initially penned by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and signed by about 300 people at the Seneca Falls Convention, was founded. The wording of it is the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, reworded to make men and women created equal. There is the call for the abolishment of race-based slavery that begins loudly by the 1830s. There's trickles before, and of course, people in those shoes always felt that way. But there's an organized movement that rises up to abolish slavery by the 1830s and continues through. There are labor movements in the United States. There are waves of women's rights activism. There are waves of LGBT activism demanding that, just because I'm lesbian or gay or bisexual or, transgender or gender nonconforming, I'm a human being and I deserve my civil rights in US society. So there's been all of those things. There's been other movements, but fabulous, strong movements of people demanding their inclusion in these spaces. The civil rights movement. There have been multiple civil rights movements. There are also civil rights movements by those who are of Latinx origin and those who are of Asian origin, right? So there's, African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinx Americans calling for their right to just live and be and have an equality of opportunity in these United States. Long history. In that history, there are the oppressors. And overwhelmingly, those oppressors have been white. They've also been, the males have been at the top of that hierarchy, while there are white women who have also participated in that oppression, and certainly white women who abuse their slaves or whatever and more. In that space, white men also dominated those white women. But, there's this white oppressor structure. A man named Jared Diamond, an anthropologist named Jared Diamond, did a fabulous book and a National Geographic 3-part documentary series called Guns, Germs, and Steel. He lays out a sound and I believe logical hypothesis for how it came to be that it was Europeans that dominated all of the continents of the globe, right? Europeans didn't just subjugate the Americas, they committed genocide in the Americas. They also subjugated all around the globe, right? So this imposition of Europeans upon cultures and peoples all over the world. And there was a lot of killing, intentional land removals, and air quotes ethnic cleansing, the air quotes around the cleansing, and just a lot of that going on for a couple of centuries, 5 or better, and maybe 6 now, and so there's that space, and there's also very real ways in which it matters who's in power, right? So setting aside, so with that, there was a justification of oppression. So the oppressor needed to justify doing oppression by saying that the oppressed was not equally human. When men oppress women, they get into the space of saying that women are not quite like them. They're not, they're more emotional. They're not logical. They're weaker. They're not, in religion, Eve was created later at a separate time for a separate purpose. Adam was created to serve God and in God's image, and Eve was created in Adam's image and not quite, and was, created later to serve Adam. The otherization of the one you're going to oppress. To oppress someone else, you have to view them as less human than yourself. And so that's what has happened in sexism. It also happens in racism. So as white people desired, as Europeans, they didn't conceive of themselves as white at that time, as European explorers and conquerors came around the globe, and as they came, we'll take the Americas, as they came to the Americas, they socially constructed in their own minds the indigenous populations that they found here as heathen, other, less than. And so they felt perfectly justified in removing them at the edge of the sword, or in, not feeling so bad when the smallpox epidemics they brought spread through the population and killed a lot. And so there's a clear intent often to commit genocide. The smallpox infested blankets given to the Lenape who inhabited this land I'm currently sitting on right now. So there's that. And there's also, so there's this construction. Then, because the indigenous populations were killed off very rapidly within 2 years of Columbus's arrival on that first island he landed on, the indigenous population was gone. He enslaved them. He killed a lot of them, and others died of epidemics that he and his men brought, unknowingly, the epidemics. But there was a language talking about manifest destiny, and here in the mainland, and talking about these places as empty, right? And so this was an empty, barren wilderness. It was an empty continent. Just God had ordained that white people, that Europeans, should come here and inhabit this land, and should subdue the wilderness, and should, make it fruitful for his glory. There's that sort of rhetoric. But then, because capitalism needs free labor or underpaid labor, seriously underpaid labor, in order to make a profit, and the indigenous population is not working out for these various reasons. They go and they begin to capture and to transport Africans to the Americas, to the colonies, and to the islands around this continent, and to subjugate them and to hold them. If somebody takes you by sword, or by gun, if somebody, holds your kids captive, like whatever that looks like, any of us can be subjugated. And so that happens, this history of enslavement. And then there's this, there's these lovely words in this formation of this government, and people saying me too and pressing in. And so we end up with this long history in the United States of this ideology that says that the Africans that were brought here were not, they were pagan and heathen like the Native Americans, but they were also, there's this construct, this just self-justification by the European enslavers and slave owners, that they weren't as human as white people. They weren't as smart. They didn't feel the same way. They didn't feel pain the same way. They didn't love their children the same way. They weren't equally bonded to spouses. They weren't equally bereft when taken away from extended family groups. That they didn't feel it, right? That they were less than. That they were more like cattle or the animals. We also demean and diminish the feelings, potentially, of the thoughts and feelings of livestock and pets, but that's a different story. Here we clearly have human and human. Biologically, we know for a fact that race is a social construction, that there is no difference between racial groups beneath the level of the skin. Levels of melanin in the skin, facial features, hair color and texture, eye color, phenotype is what those things are, right? And there's nothing deeper to race. There is culture, there is music and religion and food and whatever. Those are all just ways that peoples in localities got found to express themselves creatively. That is not actually, we're not actually distinct races. We are only one human race. But this justification, this idea that we were different races and that the white race was supreme, was superior, was smarter, was better, and hence was able to be the oppressor, that was a proof of the supremacy of the white race, the fact that they could subjugate and dominate and kill and hold in bondage. So we've come some distance from then, but we've come some distance from there with long-standing institutions still in play. So there is this ongoing institutionalization of racism in American society, this place in which there is bigotry and prejudice because it is the smog in the air we breathe, to quote Beverly Daniel Tatum, author of the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Highly recommend the book. But Tatum argues, It's everywhere. It's in all of our media. It's in our cartoons. It's everywhere. It's been in our cartoons all along. It's still in our cartoons. It's still in our movies. It's still in our television. There's racism in our culture, in our mainstream American culture. And in that when you take that internalization, like it's, how do you keep smog out of your body? How do you keep prejudice out of yourself when you're fed stereotypes since infancy, whatever that is? So, and whatever people group you are in, you've been fed stereotypes about the others, right? You may have internalized stereotypes about your own. It's certainly difficult to take out their stereotypes around gender. It's difficult to divest myself of stereotypes about women. And so this internalization, LGBT people internalizing homophobia or transphobia. There's just, it's hard to not internalize. We are social beings. We are socialized into being human beings. We internalize the norms of the cultures that we are growing up in and what we are given, and we internalize them about ourselves as well as about others. And so here in this space, when that meets a person who has gatekeeping power, you end up with institutions that self-reproduce down through the generations, ongoing racial segregation. We have overwhelmingly still residential racial segregation. We have overwhelmingly, if I ask my undergraduate students, how many of you, seriously for a moment, think to yourself, what were the percentages of racial groups in your school, in your grade school, your middle school, your high school? Overwhelmingly, because we live separately residentially, overwhelmingly our school systems are still hyper segregated, some of us more moderately. So if you take an area like Philadelphia, where I live, Philadelphia itself has a large African American population. Most of the public grade schools are predominantly Black or Latinx. Most of the white parents are struggling to pay and hurting themselves financially, often to pay into private schools and Christian schools and Catholic schools, some sort of non-public institution for their children. And then you go out into the ring of suburbs closest to the city, and there's much more mixed race residency in the near suburbs, and relatively integrated school settings. But then you move out further and you just get overwhelmingly white schools, right? And so when I say to students, like, what was I did a service learning project in a school in the Atlantic City Inlet back around 2001-ish. And they called it a diverse school. It was 98% Black and 2% Latinx in both students and even in teachers. And so in that setting, that's not what diversity means. Diversity does not mean Black and Latinx, diversity means like all of us, right? And so if my school is 70% white, that's still pretty segregated. If my school is 90% white, it's really segregated. If my school is, what's real inclusion? What's real equity? Well, it depends on the population right there, but it also depends on the fact that we're not living together in many, many spaces in the United States. And there's a long history of racial cleansing, air quotes cleansing, behind some of that too. But okay, so in this space, critical race theory, those who are teaching critical race theory are simply teaching real history, and no one's blaming the past. I mean, the past is the past, but nobody's taking a fourth grader today and saying, you are at fault for the fact that, somebody transported Africans and enslaved them. And, nobody's saying you are at fault if you're a 10th grader, that you are, or even a college student. Nobody's saying you are at fault for what happened here, there. Nobody's saying that most of us are at fault for what might be going on now. But what we are saying is that we're all here. Those of us who are here now are responsible to actively work on our own stuff, to find what we've internalized, to analyze it, to get it out, and to be actively anti-racist to make a better world. that all of us are part of this struggle, that all of us are called to make change, right? To make things better. And so so when they actually, the spaces that are yelling and people trying to, there's 12 states with Republican dominated legislatures trying to pass laws to forbid critical race theory, the teaching of critical race theory in the K to 12 range. Nobody's teaching critical race theory because nobody's teaching about race and law in grade school, middle school, and high school. There's that, and then there's 30 Republican Congress people who have signed on to asking for some federal bill to forbid the teaching of diversity and inclusion and race theory in the federal government and the military. Stop. We need to teach true American history. We need in that to also teach the history of white allies. There have always, and if I'm teaching women's rights, I'm also teaching about male allies who have helped in the fight for women's rights. If I'm teaching about the struggle for LGBTQ rights, there are straight allies, right? There are cisgendered allies there are allies in every movement. In any given social justice movement, the people group most affected should and do have leadership and take charge. And others of us should come alongside. And across coalitions, we should support each other's spaces, each other's struggles, because what we all want is an equitable United States of America in which every people group has the opportunity to prosper and to not be blocked, right? So if I am a gatekeeper, if I am someone who hires people, if I am someone who decides who to admit to school, I should actually make it so I can't see names. So I can't, because our names often tell our gender. Our names generally tell our gender, right? Our names often give some indication of our race or ethnic background. I should cover all that and really just look at the resumes, the facts of the resumes, and call for interviews with the people whose resumes call for it. If I'm actually, we've done double-blind studies we've done studies in sociology where you send in two people with identical credit histories to apply for housing loans, to apply for mortgages. And there are real distinct differences based on race. When you do that kind of research, that needs to end, right? And so there needs to be an end to police executions of unarmed citizens. Like a broken taillight is not a capital offense, is not an offense that is given capital punishment, and it is not the job of anyone, officer or vigilante, to execute someone without a trial, right? And so if I am pulling out a cell phone, that is not a lethal weapon. If I am getting my wallet out to pull out my ID, not a lethal weapon, should not be shot dead for obeying the order to get my wallet and give you my driver's license. So in this space, let us understand that we are looking for, working for, believing for a better America. We're teaching the truth of our history. We're doing our best to look at and analyze the truth of our current situation, doing the best for each of us to step forward as a leader and as a worker, as an ally in fighting for justice now and going forward. For we owe it to our ancestors, we owe it to our descendants. There have been this COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. There have been 6,600 reported attacks on Asian American Pacific Islander people, many of them elderly, many of them female, not that but all male and female, all ages, but a lot of them like, ooh, look, there's an old person who looks Asian. Let me go stab them as they wait for the bus. This has been going on, right? Because there's been racialized rhetoric around a pandemic we've all suffered with. Actually, the variant that swept through the United States from February and March of 2020 until January of 2021 was the Italian variant, overwhelmingly. The variant we're going through now overwhelmingly appears to be the British variant. There are other variants coming. We weren't actually swept with the variant from Wuhan, but I am rejoicing for that space. We can talk more in the future about some of the history of discrimination against Asian Americans and Asians in America, about some of this, the anti-miscegenation laws and some of the, what is the history of immigration there, and what is this ongoing issue. But there are many, many, many of us experiencing discrimination in the ways we are embodied in one category or another. And so all of us are equally human beings, and nobody, it's a boogeyman. It's a straw man. It's not true to say those of us teaching race studies, we're not overwhelmingly Democrat. Some of us are Republican or independents. It is not part of the Democratic National Platform to teach critical race theory. It is a field of academic scholarship that has arisen over decades of work. There are there are universities all over the country with African American studies departments and Africana studies departments and Indigenous studies departments and Latinx studies departments of various kinds. There are Asian Americans or Asian studies departments. There are, all over. There are gender studies and women's studies departments. All of these, we have decades and decades and decades of forming departments within universities and within undergraduate, graduate programs, and scholarship. Rigorous academic scholarship held to peer review, whole journals published on these, ongoingly on these topics. These are fields of academic inquiry and study, and and history itself as a field of academic study. So just all of that, American studies as a field. So we are at the point tonight where deaths around the globe have reached 3 million. This is ENCODE 2019.live, Saturday, May 22nd. Deaths around the globe are at 3,429,482. Deaths in the United States have hit 601,844. Americans are still dying at about 527 per day. Cases around yes, deaths around the globe, 3.4 million. Deaths in the United States, over 600,000. Cases around the globe, 165,000 plus. Cases around the globe, 165 million plus. Cases, in diagnosed cases, remembering there's an undercount because we didn't have tests and people can't get tests and people are everywhere. United States, tested positive, 33,797,000. So basically almost 33,800,000. It's very close to rounding up. Cases in India per day are running at 278,261. And deaths in India a day right now are at 3,880 a day. So just take a moment with me. This is the spiritual hour. This is despite anchoring it in what's going on politically, this is the moment when we take to visualize the America we want in your mind's eye, eyes opened or eyes closed. Just take a moment to see the United States living up to its full potential. See democracy truly surviving. See corrupt leaders and leaders who are all about power, authoritarian, swept from the stage of human history, swept from power, authoritarians and dictators. Whatever country around the world has a dictator in power, see the dictators removed and people truly coming into a government by the people, of the people, for the people, just seeing that space. with leaders who are elected, who truly seek to serve all of their constituents, the diversity of their constituents, and not to steal elections, but to actually to without gerrymandering and without any kinds of games or any sorts of barriers, to truly seek to work for their constituents in such a way that they can win election and re-election. See an America in which you and I and our children and our children's children and our friends and our extended families and our coworkers and all of those we know and anyone with whom we have to do, and all the diversity of people groups around us, those we know and those we don't know. See us all being able to have lives, to live lives of freedom and equality in peace, in a nation that it's doing its best to help to turn the tide of climate change, to secure our future in regard to the climate, in a reduction of warfare, in a reduction of nuclear armaments, in a reduction of racism and harm on the grounds of race, in a reduction of hate crimes, in a reduction of everything that has to do with harming each other. Even the use of sex is harm that comes against so many of us. Take this moment and see you and yours and me and mine coming safely through all the way to the other side of this. Allow yourself to see the world, to envision the world in which the vaccine works and continues to work, in which all of those around the globe have access to it, in which the peoples of other lands have full access so that new variants stop springing up. See a true end or a real bringing under of COVID-19. And in this moment again, rejoice. Feel your body in whatever state of health you have. Feel your state of health increasing. Feel the joy of the world in this space, at least in this hemisphere, with spring warming into summer. And take this moment to see, to agree with me that you and yours and me and mine are safe and well and protected. And whomever you believe in, if you believe in a divinity of some kind, just take a moment and grab hold of your God for all of us, doing your best in every way, stopping the racist jokes, intervening, speaking up where possible, standing where possible, contributing where possible to an actual just and equitable world in which we respect and honor and appreciate diversity, and in which we practice, actively practice inclusion. Till next week, be whole, be well, be safe, and continue with me to imagine a world that is better for our children's children's children. We are human beings with great creative power, and for all the ways humans have turned their power toward harm, we can turn ours toward the good. Be blessed, be well. Till next week.